The Dwarf Grill had been open for 3 years, and business was good. The tiny diner in Hapeville, Georgia, with its 8 stools and friendly service, had become a fixture for factory workers from the nearby Ford plant. Truett Cathy and his brother Ben had built something special together, working alternating 12-hour shifts, greeting customers like family, serving meals with care. The partnership felt solid, the future bright. Then came that Saturday in July of 1949. Ben Cathy finished his afternoon shift and left to meet their older brother, Horace. Both men were licensed pilots, and they planned to fly a small plane to Chattanooga, Tennessee. It should have been a routine trip, but the plane crashed near Dalton, Georgia, and in a single devastating moment, 28-year-old Truett Cathy lost both brothers. When Truett walked into the Dwarf Grill that Monday morning, the silence felt crushing. He saw the report sheet Ben had filled out Saturday afternoon, his handwriting still fresh on the page, and tears came that wouldn't stop. Most men would have closed the doors, sold everything, walked away from memories too painful to face daily. But Truett Cathy wasn't most men. Standing in that tiny diner with grief still raw, he made a decision that would change American food forever. He would not let tragedy win. He would build something his brothers would be proud of, something that honored faith, family, and the simple power of a well-made meal. What Truett couldn't know that morning was that his choice would transform a humble 8-seat diner into a restaurant empire worth billions. That his name would become synonymous with chicken sandwiches and closed Sundays. That his story would inspire millions while teaching hard lessons about the cost of success. This is the story of how one man turned grief into greatness, how he built Chick-fil-A from ashes and faith, and how even the strongest foundations require sacrifices that leave permanent marks. To understand the man who would build an empire, you must first understand the world that built him. Samuel Truett Cathy was born on March 14, 1921, in Eatonton, Georgia, a small town where everyone knew everyone, and hard work was the only currency that mattered. His parents, Joseph and Leila Cathy, weren't wealthy people. Joseph worked in insurance, but the Great Depression hit their family like it hit millions of others, turning comfortable into struggling and struggling into desperate. Young Truett watched his mother transform their small home into a boarding house, taking in strangers just to keep food on the table. 8 people lived in that house most days, sometimes more, sleeping in shifts and sharing meals that Lila stretched as far as they would go. She'd make one chicken feed 10 people, adding vegetables and bread until everyone had something warm in their bellies. Years later, Truett would say those meals taught him more about generosity than any sermon ever could. His mother never turned anyone away, never complained about the work, never made her guests feel like burdens. She simply loved people through food, a lesson her son would carry for the rest of his life. But the boarding house lessons went deeper than generosity. Truett learned to see people, really see them. The traveling salesman with worn shoes and tired eyes, the families displaced by economic collapse, the elderly folks with nowhere else to go. Each person carried a story, and each story mattered. In that crowded house where privacy was a luxury and dignity was a choice, Truett discovered something profound, that treating people with respect costs nothing and means everything. He watched his mother serve breakfast with the same care whether someone could pay or not. He saw his father shake hands with every boarder, looking them in the eye, making them feel worthy. These weren't lessons you could learn in a classroom. They were lessons written in the quiet moments of daily kindness, in the choice to see humanity in hardship. By the time Truett was a teenager, he'd started learning another crucial skill, the art of selling. He sold Coca-Cola bottles door to door, earning pennies that he'd save in a jar under his bed. He sold magazines, newspapers, whatever he could carry and convince someone to buy. At 13, he was already thinking like an entrepreneur, already understanding that success came from showing up, working hard, and treating customers right. When he graduated from high school, the year was 1939 and the world was sliding toward war. Truett took a job at a local factory, but the pay was terrible and the work felt meaningless. He wanted more, not in terms of money necessarily, but in terms of purpose. He wanted to build something that mattered. Then came World War II. Truett served in the United States Army, an experience that shaped his discipline and work ethic. When he returned home after receiving his honorable discharge in 1945, he found his younger brother Ben equally eager to build something of their own. They'd talked about opening a grocery store, but the idea evolved into something different. A restaurant. A place where working people could get good food at fair prices, where service mattered as much as the meal. With their combined savings and a loan of $6,400 from a local bank, they scraped together the $10,600 needed to open their dream. On May 23, 1946, the Cathy brothers opened the Dwarf Grill in Hapeville, Georgia, right across from the Ford Motor Company plant. The location wasn't random. They knew factory workers needed breakfast before their shifts and dinner after, and the Dwarf Grill would be there to serve them. The building was tiny, just 512 square feet, with 8 stools at a counter and 4 small tables. But it was theirs. They worked 24 hours a day, 6 days a week, alternating 12-hour shifts, so one brother was always present. Ben handled much of the operations while Truett managed customer service, greeting every person who walked through the door like they were family. For 3 years, the partnership thrived. The brothers learned the restaurant business together, made mistakes together, celebrated successes together. The first day's sales totaled just $58.20, barely enough to cover expenses. But they learned quickly what worked and what didn't. They discovered that the Ford plant ran 3 shifts, which meant potential customers at all hours. They realized that quality mattered more than speed, that a perfectly cooked burger brought people back, while a rushed one lost them forever. They experimented with hours, with menu items, with pricing. Some ideas succeeded brilliantly. Others failed spectacularly. Through it all, they remained partners in the truest sense, sharing both profits and problems equally. The Dwarf Grill became known for certain things, cleanliness first and foremost. Truett insisted that every surface shine, that dishes be washed immediately, that floors be mopped multiple times daily. He'd seen boarding houses where standards slipped, and he remembered how quickly customers noticed. Consistency mattered too. A regular who ordered scrambled eggs every Tuesday morning expected them to taste exactly like they had the previous Tuesday. The Cathy brothers delivered that consistency through careful systems, written recipes, and unwavering attention to detail. They also became known for treating employees well, even in an era when restaurant workers were often viewed as disposable. The brothers paid fair wages, offered steady hours, and created an environment where people wanted to show up. Some employees stayed for years, becoming part of the Dwarf Grill family. This loyalty paid dividends when things got busy or when unexpected challenges arose. People who felt valued worked harder, cared more, and represented the restaurant well to customers. The Ford plant workers became regulars, some stopping in multiple times a day. First shift workers grabbed breakfast before clocking in at 6. Second shift folks came for lunch, Third-shift employees, finishing work in the early morning hours, knew the Dwarf Grill would be open, serving hot food when most of the world slept. Truett and Ben learned names, remembered preferences, asked about families. These weren't just transactions. They were relationships, connections that made the tiny diner feel like a community gathering place rather than just a business. They discussed expanding, maybe opening a second location someday. The profits weren't huge yet, but they were steady. More importantly, they'd proven the concept worked. A small, well-run restaurant with good food and excellent service could succeed even in a modest location. Ben talked about finding another spot near a different factory. Truett considered whether they could replicate their culture in a second location, or whether growth would dilute what made the Dwarf Grill special. These conversations happened late at night after closing, or during rare, slow moments when both brothers could sit down together. The future felt bright, full of possibility. The Dwarf Grill felt like the beginning of something bigger. Then came that Saturday in July. Ben finished his shift, said goodbye to Truett, and left with their brother Horace for what should have been a simple flight to Chattanooga. When the news reached Truett that the plane had crashed near Dalton, that both brothers were gone, the world stopped. He'd lost Ben, his business partner and best friend, the person who knew the restaurant as intimately as he did. He'd lost Horace, who'd helped him build the house where Truett now lived with his new wife, who'd been part of their tight-knit family. Two brothers, gone in an instant. The pain was indescribable, the loss incomprehensible. For Truett, the explanation of engine failure and mechanical problems didn't matter. Nothing mattered except the impossible fact that Ben would never walk through that door again, would never cook another breakfast, would never debate whether to add a new menu item. The restaurant they'd built together suddenly felt like a monument to loss. The easy choice would have been to walk away, to sell the Dwarf Grill and find work that didn't remind him of Ben every single day. But Truett remembered his mother stretching one chicken to feed 10 people. He remembered his father shaking hands with dignity. He remembered that hard times don't excuse giving up. They demand doubling down. So he kept the doors open. He cooked the breakfasts, served the lunches, cleaned the grills, and locked up at night. He did Ben's job and his own job, working 16-hour days because the alternative was letting grief swallow him whole. The factory workers kept coming, and Truett kept serving them with a smile that sometimes felt impossible, but was always genuine. He also felt responsibility for Ben's widow, Eunice, and their daughter. He bought Ben's share of the business from Eunice, and for years afterward made certain they had everything they needed. In the kitchen of that tiny diner, in the early morning hours before the sun came up, Truett Cathy learned something that would define the rest of his life. That purpose is the antidote to pain. That serving others pulls you outside yourself. That building something bigger than your own hurt can transform tragedy into legacy. He didn't know it yet, but he was laying the foundation not just for a restaurant, but for an empire built on principles that would never bend. The years after his brothers' deaths were hard and long. Truett worked constantly, barely sleeping, barely stopping. Fortunately, he wasn't entirely alone. Around the time of the tragedy, he reconnected with his childhood sweetheart, Jeanette McNeil. They'd known each other from church since they were children, but love didn't bloom until adulthood. Most of their early dates were spent sitting in the Dwarf House, as the restaurant was now called, listening to music from the jukebox. Sometimes after finishing his 10 o'clock shift on Saturday nights, they'd go to a movie where Truett, exhausted from endless work, would fall asleep before the film ended. But it didn't matter. They were in love. On September 19, 1948, they married. Jeanette understood his drive, his need to work, his belief that rest was something you earned only after you'd given everything you had. Together they started building not just a business, but a family. Their first son, Dan, was born in 1952. 2 more children would follow, Bubba and Trudy. Jeanette managed the home while Truett managed the diner, and both worked harder than most people thought possible. The Dwarf grill during those years operated on razor-thin margins. Some months, Truett barely made enough to cover rent and supplies. He'd stand at the grill before dawn, preparing for the breakfast rush, his hands moving through muscle memory while his mind calculated pennies and dollars. Every ingredient mattered, every customer counted, every decision carried weight. But Truett discovered something in those lean years that would shape his entire philosophy. That financial struggle wasn't his enemy, it was his teacher. It taught him to value every dollar, to waste nothing, to respect the resources entrusted to him. It taught him that profit wasn't about getting rich quick. It was about consistent excellence over time, about earning customer loyalty meal by meal, day by day, year by year. He learned to read people during those early morning hours at the counter. The factory worker who ordered the same thing every day, scrambled eggs and toast with black coffee, wanted efficiency and consistency. The businessman stopping in before a meeting needed quick service and a clean environment. The elderly couple who came in on Saturdays wanted conversation as much as they wanted food. Truett gave each person what they needed, adjusting his approach, his pace, his words to match their expectations. This wasn't manipulation, it was attention, the kind of genuine care that comes from seeing people as individuals rather than transactions. Years later, when Chick-fil-A grew into a massive corporation, this same principle would define its customer service model. See the person, not just the order. Serve the need, not just the meal. In those early years, the Dwarf House became more than just a place to eat. It became a community center, a second home for the factory workers who stopped in daily. Truett knew their names, their families, their struggles. He'd extend credit to men who came up short on payday, never making them feel small about it. He'd cook extra food and send it home with single fathers or families going through hard times. The diner ran on thin margins, but Truett believed that generosity created loyalty, and loyalty created stability. He was right. His customers became his advocates, spreading word about the little diner where the owner treated you like family and the food tasted like home. But Truett wasn't content to simply maintain. He was always thinking, always experimenting, always looking for ways to improve. In the late 1950s, he started playing with chicken recipes. Fried chicken was popular in the South, but it took too long to cook for a quick service diner. Customers didn't want to wait 20 minutes for their meal. Truett needed something faster, something that could be prepared ahead and served hot within minutes. That's when he started experimenting with pressure cooking chicken, a technique that could cut cooking time in half while keeping the meat tender and juicy. He tried different breading, different seasonings, different cooking temperatures. His wife tasted version after version, offering feedback, suggesting tweaks. His kids became unofficial taste testers, giving honest opinions that only children can give. The breakthrough came almost by accident. Truett was working with boneless chicken breasts, trying to create something unique in an industry dominated by bone-in pieces. One evening after the dinner rush, experimenting with different cooking methods, he realized that pressure cooking could seal in moisture while creating a tender texture that fried chicken rarely achieved. The key was in the timing and temperature, the precise balance that couldn't be rushed or approximated. He spent months perfecting the process, writing down every detail, every measurement, every minute of cooking time. When something worked, he'd repeat it exactly. When something failed, he'd analyze why and adjust. His scientific approach to cooking wasn't common in restaurants of that era, but Truett understood that consistency required precision, that customers deserved the same quality every single time. By 1964, Truett had perfected something special: a boneless chicken breast, seasoned, breaded, pressure-cooked, and served on a buttered bun with 2 pickles. It sounds simple, almost too simple to be revolutionary. But that sandwich would change everything. He called it the Chick-fil-A, a playful spelling that suggested quality chicken, grade A, the best you could get. He started serving it at the Dwarf house, which had expanded beyond its original 8 stools. Customers loved it immediately. The sandwich was hot, juicy, flavorful, and fast. It was perfect for workers on lunch breaks, families grabbing dinner, anyone who wanted quality food without the wait. Truett saw an opportunity bigger than one restaurant. Shopping malls were starting to appear across America, these massive indoor complexes where people spent hours shopping, walking, browsing. They needed places to eat, and Truett believed his chicken sandwich could thrive in that environment. In 1967, he opened the first Chick-fil-A restaurant in Greenbrier Mall in Atlanta. It wasn't a traditional standalone restaurant. It was a small counter-service spot inside the mall, designed for speed and convenience. The concept was risky. Most people thought chicken couldn't compete with burgers, that Americans wanted beef, not poultry. But Truett trusted his product and his instincts. The Greenbrier location succeeded beyond his expectations. Lines formed at lunchtime, customers returned daily, and word spread. The sandwich wasn't just good, it was craveable. People started requesting the recipe, asking if Truett would franchise, wondering if he could bring Chick-fil-A to their city. This was the moment that would define his legacy. Most entrepreneurs facing this kind of success would have rushed to expand, selling franchises as fast as possible to maximize profit. But Truett Cathy wasn't motivated by money alone. He was motivated by something deeper, a belief that business should serve a higher purpose. Before he expanded, he made 3 decisions that would set Chick-fil-A apart from every other fast food chain in America. First, he decided the restaurants would close on Sundays. Not for strategic reasons, not to create artificial scarcity, but because he believed people needed a day of rest, a day for worship, family, and renewal. His advisors thought he was insane. Restaurants make significant revenue on Sundays. Closing meant leaving money on the table, lots of money. But Truett didn't care. His faith wasn't negotiable, and his values weren't for sale. If you worked for Chick-fil-A, you'd have Sundays off, guaranteed. No exceptions, no compromises. Second, he decided that Chick-fil-A wouldn't franchise in the traditional sense. Most fast food chains sold franchises to anyone with money, often absentee owners who hired managers and collected profits from a distance. Truett hated that model. He believed restaurant quality depended on ownership engagement, so he created a unique system. Chick-fil-A would own all the restaurants, all the real estate, all the equipment. Operators, as he called them instead of franchisees, would pay a small initial fee and then receive a percentage of sales. In exchange, operators had to work in their restaurant, be present, be involved, be leaders. This meant Truett could select operators based on character and commitment, not just capital. He could build a culture, not just a chain. The selection process Truett developed for operators became legendary in the restaurant industry. Unlike other chains that processed franchise applications like paperwork, Chick-fil-A treated operator selection like choosing family members. Candidates went through multiple interviews, background checks, and assessment days where Truett and his team watched how they interacted with people, handled stress, and demonstrated character. They didn't just ask about business experience. They asked about faith, family, values. They wanted to know what kept candidates up at night, what they dreamed about, what mattered most to them beyond making money. Some applicants found the process invasive, too personal for a business relationship. Those people didn't become operators. The ones who understood that Chick-fil-A was building something different, something that required alignment of values, not just skills. Those were the people who received the opportunity. Truett personally interviewed hundreds of potential operators in those early years. He'd sit across from candidates and ask simple questions that revealed complex truths. Tell me about a time you failed. How do you handle conflict? What does success mean to you? Why do you want to do this? He listened more than he talked, watching body language, noting inconsistencies between words and actions, sensing whether someone's motivation aligned with Chick-fil-A's mission. He turned down wealthy business people who saw operations as passive income. He turned down experienced restaurant managers who couldn't articulate their values. He chose former teachers, coaches, military veterans, people who demonstrated servant leadership in other contexts and wanted to apply those principles in business. His instincts were remarkably accurate. The operators he selected built businesses that thrived for decades, creating cultures that reflected his original vision long after he stopped being directly involved. Third, he decided that every business decision would be filtered through a simple question. Does this honor God, serve people, and build character? Profit mattered, growth mattered, but never at the expense of principles. This wasn't marketing strategy. This was genuine conviction. Truett believed that if he took care of his employees, they'd take care of customers, and customers would take care of the business. It was an inverted pyramid that put service above sales, people above profit. Most business schools would have laughed at the model, but Truett wasn't asking for permission. He was building something different, something that reflected his deepest beliefs about faith, work, and human dignity. As Chick-fil-A began expanding through the 1970s, Truett's unusual approach started proving itself. Operators who were carefully selected and deeply invested ran cleaner restaurants, provided better service, and created loyal customer bases. The Sunday closure, rather than hurting business, actually helped it. Customers knew they could count on consistent hours, and employees appreciated a company that valued their personal lives. The culture Truett built attracted people who shared his values, creating a self-reinforcing cycle of quality and commitment. By the end of the decade, Chick-fil-A had dozens of locations, all thriving, all different from the typical fast food experience. But success came with complications. The more the company grew, the more time Truett spent away from his family. He traveled constantly, visiting operators, checking locations, solving problems. Jeanette held the family together while Truett built the business. A familiar dynamic in that era, but one that came with costs. His children watched their father work relentlessly, building something impressive but also building distance. The Cathy household during those years reflected the tension between success and sacrifice. Truett would come home exhausted from trips, his mind still processing business decisions, operator concerns, expansion strategies. Jeanette tried to create normalcy, family dinners, and weekend activities, but increasingly, Truett's attention was divided. He loved his children deeply, showed up for important events, provided everything they needed materially. But emotional presence, the kind that requires stillness and focused attention, became scarce. He didn't see it happening. To him, building Chick-fil-A was building their future, securing their family's legacy, demonstrating through action what hard work and faith could accomplish. He believed his children would understand, would see his sacrifice as love expressed through provision and example. Dan did understand, perhaps because as the eldest he remembered leaner times, or perhaps because his personality naturally aligned with his father's work ethic. He joined Chick-fil-A after college, starting at entry level despite being the founder's son, working weekends and holidays, learning every position from the ground up. Truett appreciated this, but rarely said so out loud. In the Cathy family, love was demonstrated through work, through showing up, through doing what needed to be done without complaint. Words of affirmation, emotional vulnerability, conversations about feelings, these weren't tools Truett's generation used comfortably. They worked hard, provided well, and trusted that actions spoke louder than words. Trudy, the youngest and only daughter, carved her own path with creative energy and independent spirit. She eventually became involved with Windshape camps, directing programs that helped young girls build character and faith. Her relationship with Truett had warmth, though like many father-daughter bonds of that era, it carried unspoken feelings and love expressed through actions rather than words. Bubba, the middle son, found his place within the family business too, eventually becoming executive vice president and leading the Dwarf House division. Each child navigated the unique challenges of being a Cathy, of living in the shadow of a father whose success seemed both inspiring and impossible to match. Throughout the 1980s, Chick-fil-A exploded. The company opened standalone restaurants, not just mall locations. The Chick-fil-A sandwich became iconic, recognized across the South and slowly spreading nationwide. Truett's leadership style, warm but exacting, built a company culture unlike anything in the industry. He treated his operators like family, sending them handwritten notes, visiting their stores, celebrating their successes. He created programs to honor employees who went above and beyond, not with bonuses, but with genuine recognition and appreciation. He established scholarship programs for team members wanting to pursue education, investing in their futures beyond their time at Chick-fil-A. The company's Christian identity became more pronounced. Truett spoke openly about his faith, not to exclude others, but to explain his motivations. He believed business could be ministry, that serving customers with excellence was a form of worship. Some critics accused him of mixing religion and commerce inappropriately. Others questioned whether his faith-based approach could sustain a major corporation. But Truett never wavered. He'd built Chick-fil-A on specific principles, and those principles weren't changing regardless of criticism or conventional wisdom. His stubbornness on this point became legendary. Suppliers, partners, even his own executives learned that certain things simply weren't open for discussion. Sundays were sacred. Character came before credentials. Service came before sales. These weren't slogans. They were laws. Yet even as the business flourished, Truett faced a personal crisis that tested his faith more deeply than any business challenge ever could. In 1959, at age 38, he was diagnosed with colon cancer. The news hit like a hammer. He was building an empire, raising young children, finally seeing his dreams materialize. And now doctors were telling him the cancer was serious, that surgery was necessary, that outcomes were uncertain. Jeanette tried to reassure him. "God isn't finished with your life yet," she told him. "I don't think he's going to take you." Truett wasn't nearly so optimistic. He faced the possibility of leaving his wife a widow, his children fatherless, his business unfinished. But he approached his surgical treatment with a sense of peace rooted in his faith. "Whether I lived or died, I would be with God," he later recalled in his memoir. The surgery was successful. Truett survived, going on to live another 5.5 decades. But the experience marked him. It reminded him that success means nothing if you don't live to enjoy it, that tomorrow isn't guaranteed, that faith isn't just for Sundays, but for the moments when everything feels uncertain. By the 1990s, Truett Cathy had become a recognizable figure in American business. Not celebrity famous, but respected, a quiet giant whose influence exceeded his public profile. He wrote books about leadership and faith. He spoke at churches and business conferences, sharing the story of how a tiny 8-seat diner became a billion-dollar enterprise. He emphasized that success wasn't about clever marketing or aggressive expansion. It was about consistency, about showing up every day with the same commitment to quality and character. It was about treating the person taking your order with the same respect you'd show a corporate executive. It was about remembering that behind every transaction was a human being deserving of dignity. But Truett's legacy extended beyond chicken sandwiches and business principles. Through Windshape Foundation, an organization he founded in 1984, he'd invested millions in foster care, scholarships, marriage retreats, and summer camps. The name Windshape reflected his belief that you could shape winners through support and encouragement. The foundation built homes for foster children, providing stable environments for kids whose lives had been marked by instability. It funded college educations for young people who otherwise couldn't afford higher learning. It created camps where children could experience nature, challenge themselves, and build character. Truett believed that business success created responsibility to give back, and he gave generously, quietly, often anonymously. The idea for Windshape came from personal conviction and painful observation. Truett had seen too many talented young people trapped by circumstances beyond their control. Kids born into poverty or chaos who had potential but no pathway. Foster children who aged out of the system with nowhere to go and no one to guide them. Bright students who could excel in college but couldn't afford tuition. Marriages struggling under financial or emotional strain with no support system to help them heal. He believed that with the right intervention, at the right moment, lives could be transformed. Not through handouts that created dependency, but through genuine investment that built capability and confidence. Windshape Homes became one of Truett's proudest achievements. Working with Berry College in Rome, Georgia, he created residential communities where foster children could live in stable, family-like environments with house parents who provided consistent love and structure. Unlike traditional group homes or rotating foster placements, Windshape Homes offered permanence. Children stayed in the same house with the same house parents through their entire childhood if needed. They attended local schools, made lasting friendships, participated in sports and activities. They experienced what every child deserves, a place to belong, adults who consistently showed up, and the security that comes from knowing home isn't temporary. Truett visited Windshape Homes regularly, not for photo opportunities, but for genuine connection. He'd sit with the kids, ask about their lives, listen to their dreams. He'd throw football in the yard, help with homework, attend their school events. To him, these weren't charity cases. They were children who deserved the same opportunities his own grandchildren enjoyed. He funded college scholarships for Windshape kids, setting up trust funds that would support their education regardless of what career they chose. He created mentorship programs connecting them with successful adults who could guide and encourage. He invested in therapy and counseling services, recognizing that healing past trauma required professional support alongside loving environment. The Windshape College program extended Truett's generosity to Chick-fil-A employees. Any team member who worked for the company could apply for scholarships, receiving financial support for their education. Thousands of young people, many working at Chick-fil-A to pay bills while pursuing degrees, received help that made the difference between dropping out and graduating. Truett understood their struggle personally. He remembered working multiple jobs, counting pennies, wondering if the sacrifice would ever pay off. These scholarships weren't publicity stunts. They were investments in people, recognition that everyone deserves a chance to build a better future through education and hard work. His approach to philanthropy matched his approach to business. It wasn't about publicity or tax benefits. It was about actually helping people, actually making a difference in lives that needed hope. He'd visit the foster homes, talk with the kids, learn their stories. He'd attend the camps, watching children discover confidence through simple challenges like rock climbing or canoeing. He'd meet scholarship recipients, hearing their gratitude and dreams, seeing himself in their determination to overcome difficult circumstances. These weren't photo opportunities. They were relationships, connections that reminded Truett why success mattered at all. In his final years, Truett spent less time at corporate headquarters and more time with family. The man who'd once worked 16-hour days now understood that presence mattered more than productivity. He played with great-grandchildren, teaching them the same lessons his mother had taught him about generosity and kindness. He took long walks with Jeanette, the woman who'd stood beside him for more than 6 decades, sharing silence that spoke louder than words. He read his Bible every morning, finding comfort in scriptures that had carried him through both triumph and tragedy. He wrote in journals, recording thoughts and memories, trying to make sense of a life that had encompassed more joy and more pain than he'd ever imagined possible. Those final years brought a different kind of wisdom, the kind that only comes when you've lived long enough to see the full arc of choices and consequences. Truett reflected on decisions made decades earlier, some with pride, others with regret. He thought about the nights he'd missed tucking his children into bed because he was at the restaurant, the school plays he'd attended in body but not in spirit, his mind still calculating food costs and labor percentages, the conversations he'd postponed, believing there would always be time later. He couldn't change the past, but he could learn from it, could share those lessons with the grandchildren and great-grandchildren who now surrounded him. His relationship with Dan deepened during these years. His eldest son, now running Chick-fil-A as CEO, faced his own challenges balancing business demands with family needs. Father and son had conversations they'd never made time for before, talking not just about company strategy, but about life, faith, regret, and redemption. Truett admitted mistakes he'd been too proud to acknowledge earlier. Dan shared his own struggles, his fears about measuring up, his determination to honor his father's legacy while adapting to changing times. These talks, often happening during early morning walks or late evening phone calls, healed wounds neither had fully recognized existed. With Trudy, relationships remained warm, filled with mutual respect and affection. She had built her own legacy through Windshape camps and missionary work, demonstrating the same servant heart her father valued. With Bubba, there was pride in watching his son lead the Dwarf House division with care and dedication, keeping alive the restaurant concept where it all began. Truett's 3 children, each in their own way, carried forward the values he'd worked so hard to instill. When interviewers asked about his secrets to success, Truett's answers remained consistent. Work hard, treat people right, put God first, and remember that wealth means nothing if you lose your character in getting it. He'd tell stories about his mother feeding boarders during the Depression, about his brothers dying young, about building a business on principles everyone said wouldn't work. He'd emphasize that Chick-fil-A's success wasn't about the chicken sandwich, though he was proud of that recipe. It was about creating a culture where employees felt valued, customers felt respected, and every transaction reflected a belief that business should serve people, not the other way around. On September 8, 2014, at age 93, Truett Cathy passed away peacefully at home, surrounded by family. The news spread quickly, and tributes poured in from across the country. Employees, customers, and competitors all shared stories of how Truett had impacted their lives. Some remembered his generosity during hard times. Others recalled his insistence on excellence without excuses. Many simply expressed gratitude for a man who'd proven that faith and business could coexist, that success and character weren't contradictions, but complements. His funeral drew thousands, from corporate executives to restaurant operators to team members who'd worked the front counter. They came not because he was rich or famous, but because he'd made them feel seen, valued, and important. The legacy Truett left behind extends far beyond restaurants and revenue. He proved that closing on Sundays wouldn't kill a business, that treating employees like family could drive success, that faith-based principles could guide a major corporation without alienating customers. He demonstrated that generosity creates loyalty, that character builds culture, that serving others with genuine care resonates deeper than any marketing campaign. Chick-fil-A today operates thousands of locations, with annual sales in the billions. It's one of the most successful restaurant chains in American history, built on a foundation of chicken sandwiches and closed Sundays, of servant leadership and unwavering values. But perhaps Truett's most important legacy is simpler and more profound. He showed that tragedy doesn't have to be the end of the story. When his brothers died in that plane crash in 1949, Truett could have quit. When he faced cancer at 38, he could have given up. When success demanded sacrifices that strained his family relationships, he could have walked away. Instead, he chose to build, to serve, to love, to keep showing up even when everything hurt. He proved that purpose can transform pain, that serving others pulls you through your own suffering, that faith isn't about never falling, but about getting back up every single time. His life wasn't perfect. His choices weren't always right. But his response to hardship, his choice to build something meaningful from the wreckage, inspired millions to do the same in their own lives. Walk into any Chick-fil-A today, and you'll see Truett's fingerprints everywhere. In the cleanliness of the restaurant, the friendliness of the team members, the efficiency of the service. In the closed sign on Sundays, a weekly reminder that some things matter more than money. In the scholarship programs, the foster care support, the community involvement that reflects a belief that business should give back. In the way employees say, "My pleasure," instead of "You're welcome," a small phrase that captures a larger philosophy about serving with joy. In the chicken sandwich itself, that simple combination of chicken, pickles, and a buttered bun that started in a tiny diner and became an American icon. But you'll also see something deeper if you look closely. You'll see the legacy of a man who understood that buildings don't make a business, people do. That profit is a result, not a purpose. That treating someone with respect costs nothing and means everything, that showing up matters more than showing off. That character built slowly over decades outweighs success achieved quickly through shortcuts. That faith isn't a marketing tool, but a foundation that holds you steady when everything else shakes. These weren't lessons Truett learned in business school. They were lessons learned at his mother's boarding house table, in the grief of losing his brothers, in the joy of serving his first customer, in the quiet moments of prayer that carried him through. The story of Truett Cathy and Chick-fil-A isn't really about fast food or business strategy. It's about resilience, about choosing to build when life tears down, about finding purpose in pain and meaning in service, about staying true to your values when everyone says you're being foolish, about loving people even when loving them costs something, about getting knocked down and choosing to stand back up again and again, until standing becomes a testament to faith stronger than circumstances. Every chicken sandwich served, every Sunday the restaurants stay closed. Every team member saying, "My pleasure," is part of that story. A story that began with tragedy and transformed into triumph through one man's stubborn refusal to let grief have the final word. Today, as you drive past a Chick-fil-A on a busy weekday and see the line wrapped around the building, or as you notice the darkened sign on Sunday morning, remember the man who made those choices. Remember the boy who watched his mother feed strangers during the Depression. Remember the young man who lost 2 brothers and chose to honor them through work and service. Remember the father who built an empire while learning hard lessons about balance and sacrifice. Remember the businessman who proved that principles and profits aren't enemies but partners when you're willing to stand firm on what matters most. Remember that behind every success story are private struggles, that beneath every confident exterior are hidden wounds, that the strongest among us often carry the heaviest burdens. Truett Cathy's life teaches us that legacy isn't measured in dollars or locations. It's measured in lives touched, values upheld, and choices made when no one's watching. It's in the single mother who gets a scholarship because someone believed education matters, the foster child who finds stability because someone created a home, the employee who has Sundays off because someone valued rest over revenue, the customer who feels respected because someone trained staff to serve with genuine care, the family that stays together because someone modeled what commitment looks like, the person who finds hope in darkness because someone else survived their own darkness and chose to share that story. In the end, Truett Cathy's story became something profound. It became a story of redemption, of faith tested and proven, of love that endures even when imperfect, of purpose that transcends pain. It became a reminder that our worst moments don't define us unless we let them, that the choice to keep building, keep serving, keep loving despite devastation is itself a kind of miracle. Truett started with 8 seats in a tiny diner and a broken heart. He ended with thousands of restaurants, millions of customers, and a legacy that will outlive us all. But more than that, he left behind proof that how you respond to tragedy matters more than the tragedy itself, that grace can grow in the cracks grief creates, that light can shine brightest in the darkest valleys. The next time you taste a Chick-fil-A sandwich, remember it's more than chicken and pickles. It's the physical manifestation of a promise made over the wreckage of a plane crash, kept through decades of work, tested by loss and illness and sacrifice, and proven true by a life that refused to surrender to sorrow. It's a reminder that the most powerful empires aren't built on conquest, but on character, not on ruthlessness, but on respect, not on taking, but on giving. It's evidence that ordinary people who hold fast to extraordinary principles can change the world one meal, one moment, one choice at a time. And it's a testament to a man who understood something that eludes so many successful people, that what you build matters less than why you build it, and that the greatest legacy isn't what you leave behind, but what you leave within the hearts of people you served.